Hello, I am Karen Gray, State Archivist at the Alaska State Archives. Welcome to PACO, Preparing Alaska's Cultural Organizations for Emergencies, funded in part by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and sponsored by the Alaska State Libraries, Archives, and Museum. Today's presentation is regarding continuity of operations, essential functions, and their records. I want to start this presentation with a disclaimer that I did indeed begin my career several decades ago in the museum field, but have spent the majority of my years working with archives and records. This means that the information we are talking about today is regarding your records, the records you each keep in your institutions relating to your staff, facilities, and collections. It also means that the images you will see in this presentation are taken from archives or libraries around Alaska, but I believe you will understand how these types of disasters could affect your institutions as well, especially if you were impacted by some of the same incidences as those disasters we're presenting here. Continuity of operations plans, or COOP planning, is about identifying what functions and records you need to get your organization back up and running after you have had a disaster, usually within 72 hours after the disaster occurred. COOP planning is a major part of disaster planning for all levels of government, including federal, state, and local levels. Here at the State Archives, we collect records that have long-term historical needs, which are essential for both citizens and government. Part of our mission is to secure and preserve those records in all formats, from digital and microforms to paper and other analog formats. And we are tasked by statute to work with state agencies and local governments to identify essential records needed for their essential functions, which are found in COOP plans. In this presentation, we will look at only a few aspects of COOP planning and how it can benefit your institution. Knowing your essential functions and the records that support those functions will help you create backups of those records to store off-site, making disaster mitigation easier and getting you back up and running so you can care for your collections. So, COOP planning is very labor-intensive. Continuity planning is not just a plan, but a culture of doing business embraced by an entire organization from top to bottom. It contains proactive and reactive strategies that keep your critical services available, practically without interruption. And a continuity plan is an umbrella plan for your institution that includes a disaster plan. Writing a COOP plan is very similar to writing a disaster plan, but it expands the scope to include people and activities rather than focusing on collections. Steps for writing a COOP include very similar steps to writing your disaster plan. When writing a COOP plan, you would analyze services and processes for critical areas, assess risks to the institution and its services, develop a strategy for mitigation and response, develop a plan, test the plan, and then update the plan. Since the PACO program is guiding you through the steps of disaster and emergency planning, we will be focusing on identifying your essential records which support the core business or essential functions of your institutions, and identifying those records needed to perform those functions, which are integral to all COOP plans. You've heard me use words essential record repeatedly so far, but they are also called vital records. Since the words are often used interchangeably, I prefer to use essential, as vital often implies birth or death records, which just happen to be essential records here in the state of Alaska. Here in Alaska, we actually have statutes for state and local government agencies stating they must identify their essential or vital records. The statute listed here is specific to state agencies and says that they must not only identify their vital or essential records, but they must segregate and protect them too. So how does this affect you, you may ask? Well, some of your institutions may be run by municipal or borough governments, and the statute regarding local government records states that the governing body, such as a city, borough, or school, shall, as far as practical, follow the program of records management established by the state. Since identifying, protecting, and segregating essential records are part of the state records program, it is beneficial for local governments and other organizations to do the same. The statute above also tasks the state archives to assist local government agencies in records management practices, so we will work with you to identify what your essential records are. Since many of the organizations participating in PACO are not tied to government bodies, we still want to help you understand the benefits of identifying, duplicating, and segregating those records so you can continue your operations after a disaster. We are available to help. Here you can see a handy chart of the types of records necessary for the continuity and/or resumption of operations of an organization during and following a disaster. The chart here was prepared for the Intergovernmental Preparedness for Essential Records, or IPER, sponsored by the Council of State Archivists and FEMA, and it lists the criteria used to identify essential records. It also shows the priority timeframes needed for accessing these records after a disaster has occurred. These 5 categories are used by business continuity or COOP plans and depend on identifying essential records in order to restore key functions of your organization as quickly as possible. So why is it important to identify these essential records? Identifying your agency's essential records is simply good business practice. While there are upfront costs involved with identifying, duplicating, and protecting essential records, the costs are far less than those incurred recovering damaged records after a disaster. Identifying essential records and their locations allows you to respond to a disaster affecting your records, minimize disruption of operations after an emergency, rapidly restore institutional services, and reduce the economic impact of the disaster. When disasters occur, many organizations do not have the luxury of closing their doors and shutting down. As you work with emergency responders, they need some types of essential records, such as building plans, to respond to the emergency. If a disaster occurs, the loss of essential records could result in the disruption of essential services you provide to the public, incur unplanned expenses of financial settlements or loss of revenue, increase the organization's risk to litigation, and reduce productivity due to gaps from missing information lost during the disaster. Electronic records pose special problems since both hardware and software protection, as well as systems documentation, need to be considered when evaluating essential records. Damage to electronic records can come from power failures, equipment failures, software problems, virus infections, and human error. Identifying essential records may seem like a daunting task, but in actuality, only a small portion of the records at an institution are usually essential. The criteria listed on this slide should be used as a guide to help you identify your essential records, and later on we will help you identify common record types that are essential to cultural heritage institutions. When analyzing records to designate as essential records, it's important to look at each state of the record's life cycle. For instance, an accounts receivable record may be essential until payment is received because you still need to bring in funds to pay for your program, but not essential after the payment has been received. Or a contract may be essential until the termination of the contracted service, after which it's no longer essential. Identifying the active essential records is very important. As you can see in this slide, there are 3 columns in this chart. The first shows the priority access, or how quickly you will need information recovered. The second column shows the 5 criteria or categories that essential records fall into. 1 are records necessary for emergency response. These are records you need to help you contact first responders or supply information to them, such as your building plans. Next are records necessary to resume or continue operations. This could include evidence of your existence, such as charters or incorporations, powers, duties, and functions of the institution, or funds owed to your institution. These will also include your employee and volunteer lists, insurance records, and payroll records. Then we have records that protect the health, safety, property, and rights of residents. You may have copies of land or vital records in your collections or ongoing litigation records that would fall under this. Then we have records that would require massive resources to reconstruct. This would include records that are unique or irreplaceable, such as computer program software or tax exemption records for your institution. Finally, we have records that document the history of communities or families. These records are not needed during the emergency, but often make up a lot of our collections and are most often unique. You can see in the last column examples of records that fall into each of these categories, including disaster recovery plans, minutes of boards, commissions, or councils, property ownership records, accounts payable and receivable records, municipal incorporation or charter documents, policies, directives, and orders, unique computer programs such as those used for collections documentation, employee lists or rosters, payroll records, employee benefit records, including survivor benefits, as-built drawings, plans and building specifications, active contracts, compacts, and agreements, product warranties, maintenance agreements, and insurance policies. If you create a chart like this, you may even want to add a fourth column to designate the recovery priority for each of the record types you identify. Once you've identified your essential records, you need to consider the following. Is the location of the records free from water or sewage pipes? Is the temperature consistent in your storage area? Is access monitored by video cameras, or is there a controlled key log? Are there multiple copies of these records, and if so, where are they and in what format? Are the records truly unique and valuable only in their native format? And if so, should they be sent to an off-site location for secure protection? Should copies be made and retained for on-site use and only kept off-site? Duplicating essential records and maintaining them in separate locations should absolutely be considered. When deciding to duplicate records, format stability, duplication costs, and physical storage location must be considered. The chart here shows some ideas of duplication methods depending on the native format of the original records. For instance, if some of your records are in paper formats, you may want to create duplicates by digitizing or microfilming them. If they are on microfilm, you may want to make a diazo microfilm copy to store off-site, or digitize the film and store the digital images in the cloud or on a backup tape off-site. If the records are in electronic format, you may want to mirror the information to an off-site storage with a cloud provider, or send backup tapes to another institution for storage. Or you could output them to microfilm and store that off-site. If creating copies is part of your COOP plan, it is important to disperse the records to other physical locations so they are not involved in the same potential disaster you are in. That means don't store them in a bank vault down the street from your institution. Send them out of town. So if you are a local government or state-run institution and you are following those statutes we saw earlier, you should segregate your essential records. But what does that mean? In today's predominantly electronic environment, it may mean duplicating the digital information and segregating the duplicate. In other words, make a backup and store it off-site, or mirror the information to a cloud provider or other off-site data facility. Once you have identified your essential records, I highly recommend you duplicate them and store them off-site. Don't store them somewhere else in town. It may be likely that the rest of your geographic area has been affected by the same disaster you have been involved in. Storing duplicated essential records in a different geographic location is the most effective way of making sure your essential information is preserved in the event that a large disaster strikes your community. There are several solutions you should consider for storing duplicates off-site. These include creating an agreement or a memorandum of agreement with another institution or municipality to store backups or duplicates of essential records. If you have a close working relationship with another institution outside your geographic location, ask them if they are willing to store backup tapes or other record formats of your essential records, and offer up the same service to them. If you don't have a close working relationship with another institution, reach out and create one. Next, you could use an off-site storage vendor or a record center. There are fees for this service, but it is an option to consider. The two record centers listed here are the ones on state contract, with one in Anchorage and the other in Juneau. Both would be happy to take your money, even if you are not bound by state contract. The third solution could be you could use a cloud storage provider. If all of your essential records are electronic or digitized, you may want to research what cloud storage services are available and within your institution's price range. When checking with the provider, make sure the service is available 24/7 and find out what they do to store your information securely. Do they store it in a different geographic location than the one you are in? What is their disaster plan for your information? Review the contract thoroughly and make sure you can access your information at any time. Make sure they are securing your information, which may include sensitive or protected documentation such as personnel records or building files. And then there is the security microfilm vault storage at the Alaska State Archives. The Disaster Recovery Microfilm Program provides free microfilm and microfiche storage for state and local government agencies in Alaska. Microfilm and microfiche may be sent to the Alaska State Archives to be stored in the archive's secure vault, which is temperature and humidity controlled to meet microfilm storage standards and equipped with state-of-the-art fire suppression systems. In addition to free secure storage, the State Archives will test the microforms for acetate deterioration or vinegar syndrome, thus ensuring the longevity of the microfilmed records for government agencies. Many state and local government agencies create microformed copies of their essential records to provide a continuity preservation copy of the record in order to reestablish operations after an emergency. Microfilm is still an affordable medium to duplicate records to and requires no hardware or software to read. It is legible to the naked eye using only a magnifying glass. Microfilm offers great space reduction aspects by storing 3,000 to 6,000 images on each 250-foot 16mm reel, incurring no extra annual fees for maintaining server space and backups. Using today's technology, a roll of microfilm can be converted to PDF or TIFF images in 40 minutes, providing digital use copies after a disaster has occurred. The State Archives also runs an Imaging and Microfilm Service Unit, or IMS, which can digitize microfilm or output digital images to microfilm for long-term storage. These services do cost money, but they are on a fee recovery basis. IMS can digitize an average roll of microfilm in an hour or so and have those images available to you quickly. Or they can take your digital images and produce microfilm and hand the microfilm over to the RIMS unit for storage when completed. You've seen the pictures of the old archives building during the 2009 flood in our prior slides, but here is the vault in our new building where we do store essential disaster recovery microfilm. Contact us to find out more about this free program and to transfer your microforms to secure offsite storage today. Some institutions may not be able to duplicate and save their records to an offsite location very quickly. Depending on the format and the amount of records, some of the records may have to be stored on site until a plan is in place to duplicate them and store them off-site. A handy idea to identify records that you consider essential is to color code them. This could include color coding the fronts of boxes or file cabinets housing your essential records. It is easier to coordinate with first responders or remediation contractors and ask to have all the red boxes brought out so you can remediate them, than wait to have access to all your records and not know which ones to prioritize for remediation. So we've talked a lot about identifying essential records and why you need them, but what are some actual examples of essential records? What should you absolutely consider as an essential record as you plan your COOP? You should consider the following: emergency contact numbers, including first responder contacts, staff and volunteer contacts, and emergency communication plans. You should have building plans, staff payroll, benefit and personnel files. Of course, you need your disaster plans and contracts for services that you have. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this going here. Okay, collections information. Your collections information essential records should include your collection catalogs and databases, loan documentation to and from other institutions, collection photographs needed for identification or insurance claims, passwords to databases, copies of software used for databases, lists of collection salvage priorities. Once you've made a list of your essential records, you will need to figure out how quickly you need them after a disaster strikes. Do you need them in the first 12 hours, within 72 hours, or after 72 hours? Although there is no perfect solution to protecting essential records, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Protecting records from minor disasters is less costly and easier to accomplish than protecting them from major disasters. Being proactive on building maintenance and not storing records in basements or underwater or sewage pipes helps mitigate the amount of minor disasters your institution may have to handle. It also limits the costs and recovery time if a disaster does occur. So remember to be proactive on building maintenance. Fix those leaks in your roofs and your window seals. Don't store records underwater or sewage pipes, in basements, or in storage sheds. Store permanent records at least 3 inches off the ground, and duplicate your essential records. And remember to keep backups from your computer, microfilm, or papers off-site so that you cannot lose all copies of your essential records in the same disaster. The final part of COOP planning that should be practiced is testing plan on an annual basis. If you have identified your essential functions, identified the records that support those functions, duplicated those records and sent them off-site, then you need to test to see that you can access or retrieve those records so you can actually function. If you don't have a listing of your staff contacts at your fingertips, how long does it take you to get that information from your offsite storage? If you want to remediate your most precious object, how long does it take you to access your collections information to find the storage location of that object? If you have to contact your insurance provider, how long does it take you to find the contact for your provider? If you don't test your COOP plan, you will not know if it works or how long it really takes to access your records. COOP plans are living documents, so test them annually and update them whenever you have changes. Thank you for listening, and if you need help identifying your essential records, please contact me at the email here on this slide. We can help you identify your essential records and any other records needs you have. Thank you.